guys, I'm here with Jeff Lippman. He has a podcast called The Garden of Doom, and it's like, how many episodes do you have now?
We have just dropped our 102nd.
That's pretty good. That's pretty intense. That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had like, I don't know, what's your elevator pitch for what your podcast is about?
I mean, I think it's pretty similar to your show. I mean, it's esoteric, mythology, theology, theosophy, sometimes pop culture,
Cryptozoology, got alien. Yeah, you got a lot of
ufology. Yeah.
yeah. So what got you? Okay, so you're a lawyer by day and a podcaster by night. So what made you finally go like, all right, let's do a podcast?
It's funny. Someone else actually recruited me to do the podcast. Um, and I was happy enough to do it because I was sort of itching to do it anyway, but I don't really have the technical skills to do it. So someone recruited me to do a podcast together. That worked out for a little bit. But he wanted to do, I think, more like current event stuff and, cover like horror movies and stuff like that. So he found a different crew and he said, take Garden of Doom and do what you want with it.
That say.
It's one of the things where we had the conversation, both said the same words, but we both thought different things. So I kept the name Garden of Doom and just ran with it, and took a little bit to get my sea legs under me as to booking guests and things like that. But well, you know how that goes, and it's just been a lot of fun. But basically, it's because I don't really love doing my own research, but I'm really, really curious about things. And the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know. And it's like the show never ends. It's like a hall of mirrors. There's always new things to explore and find out. So the show has a lot of variety. And, I'm just trying to chase guests and things that make me curious in all different arenas. Luckily enough for the audience, I'm really curious.
Cool. Yeah, and I really like a lot of your guests that you've had on. So it's a sort of similar thing for me. So okay, well then, since you're not the researcher, then what do you think about like? Give me your breakdown on okay, like let's just. What do you think about cryptozoology? Like, what do you really think Bigfoot's a thing? Like, do you really think like what about Mothman and chupacabras, or what's your take on cryptozoology? Pterodactyls.
I think it's sort of dangerous to paint anything with a broad brush, but I don't know how else for you to paint that question. Um, I think that I definitely am open to that. There's things that we haven't found out there on this earth, especially in the oceans, especially in the Amazon and some of the deeper jungles, um, and possibly other places as well. I do think most of them are sort of collective memories, um, things that that our ancestors brought from different parts of the world and sort of shared with each other. And just like a game of postman, some things grew and some things stuck with us. And, we sort of venerate oral history a little bit more than we venerate written history these days. So I think maybe we put a little bit more into that. But I'm very open to the idea of being wrong, and I would love it. I'm just waiting for more of the physical evidence as to what it is. I mean, I think a lot of it is what most people think is, some of our, ancestors found dinosaur bones and pterodactyl bones and things like that, and or remembered some of the megafauna, some of which died off not as long ago as some of us think. For instance, the oryx. There were sightings of the oryx just about 150 years ago, which is a giant bull, a giant feral cow.
Wait, an
Um,
auric. Wait, what's an auric?
it's like a giant wild cow. It's Aurochs. Well, that's pluralized, but they thought they were long extinct, and someone saw one in Poland. There's a photo of it, I think, in like 1870 or 1890.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, like well, particularly with Bigfoot, I think that we are also dealing with, and that's the thing is like I've seen some weird stuff, so I'm pretty sure we're dealing with like interdimensional beings or stuff that can appear and disappear like in front of your eyes. So I don't know what that is, or even if that is like a egregore or like a thought form that has some sort of way of appearing in our reality. Or I mean, I'm not even 100% sure what reality really is at this point. So I don't know like where I put all that in there, but it's one of those things where there's enough people that have had enough strange sightings that to dismiss all of it is, you know, as just nothing is, it just doesn't work for me. It's okay
That's
if it
fair
doesn't
enough.
work for everybody, but you know, yeah. So like that's sort of where I sit with the cryptozoology stuff. But it is interesting. Like, I saw a unicorn. Um, yeah, in the Amazon forest actually. So like that's one of those places. But
There you
uh,
go.
and I had two other people with me, and it wasn't like a halluc. I wasn't on drugs or anything. So I mean, and I didn't wasn't looking for a unicorn. Like never even thought ever in the history of my universe like I would see one of those. Like didn't even have an obsession with them or know anything about them, or it wasn't like a thing on my radar. Just horse with the horn came up and pushed me on the shoulder, and I'm like, oh wow, that horse has a horn. So
Wow.
I don't know what to do with that. Like, what category do you place that in? You know, so cryptozoology is,
Well, I'd be a believer too if I saw a unicorn.
yeah. I mean, it, yeah, and it that, well, and then that's made me just more open minded to anybody else's experiences of what else, what other things they've seen or haven't seen. So,
Yeah.
um,
I mean, we've spoken to some of the same people, or that sort of run in the same circles, and I've spoken to very credible people who have seen cryptids, and they bear testimony to that.
yeah. So, okay, what do you think about the whole alien encounter thing?
Uh, I absolutely believe in aliens, 100%. Not a doubt in my mind, and I think that almost. I'm not saying that everything that we're talking about now and anything that we've talked about, the answer is aliens. I'm just saying it could be. It's entirely possible. Magic, cryptids, visions, whether they're interdimensional beings or it just seems that way. Star Trek like beaming technology, it would appear the same to us. Angels, demons, all could be aliens. Now it could also be angels and demons. I mean, it could very well be the work of God or gods. I don't really exclude anything because I think that anyone who's overly dogmatic is always going to be wrong. You have to keep an open mind with these things. But yeah, I look at the sky and and understand what I can see with the naked eye and just the numbers of stars and planets. And in my lifetime, I'm 53. Our definition of what life is on this planet has changed. I mean, they used to say you can't find life here in a volcano. They found life in a volcano. You can't find life, this far in the ice. They found it in the ice. Life can't live this long. There's stuff thawing out in Siberia right now. So on this planet, we half the time people don't know what they're talking about in science. It keeps expanding. Well, there's microbes on the International Space Station right now.
There, water bears can live in the dead of space for like 3 years or something. You know, I mean, it's or trilobite or what are they called?
Tardigrades.
Tardigrades. Yeah. Um. Yeah, I know it's pretty crazy. So what's have you had any experiences yourself of with anything like a ghost or any kind of paranormal like deja vu things, anything?
I have had what I have to call a ghost experience because nothing else explains it. Okay, so I am no longer married, but I was, and my oldest is now almost 22. But when he was still in a crib, but could speak, so probably like a little bit, like two and a half ish. We still had the baby monitors,
Mhm.
and there was one night where the baby monitor went like the static went crazy, and a little static is normal. I mean, every parent has that. It was probably more so 18 years ago or 20 years ago, whenever that was. They're probably better now, but little static is normal. You get that. No, this was like off the charts. This was like those Geiger counters where they hit radiation, and it was almost like the space landing where there was like 2 minutes of empty space. It wasn't that long. But it was a long period. It probably was 10 seconds or less, but it felt longer because it's your baby's room. So we tear in there, and he's fine. Kid's fine. He's standing up. He's looking happy. He's smiling. Are you okay? Yeah. And he's two and a half falls back asleep. So in the morning, we're like, how are you doing? How was your night? It's like, it's great. I'm like, what was so great about it? Well, Poppy came to see me last night. Well, Poppy was my grandfather. My grandfather died in the 80s. So this is a 2-year-old in probably
2000.
2002. Right. We never, my grandmother was alive for like 4 years of their life, but we didn't really talk about my grandfather so much. It was a long time ago, and she wouldn't say Poppy. I mean, so he never heard of that term, and neither one of his grandfathers was Grandpa, the other was Pop, not Poppy. So he's like, Poppy came and he said he was really glad to see them doing well, and he just wanted to check on me and let me know that he's happy I'm here, and and now he's ready. Um, and the weirdest thing is, I had a dream about my grandfather that same night. So, and listen, yes, I'm a lawyer. Nobody likes lawyers, but I have 2 degrees. I've been licensed in one state since '94 and a second since '99. So I'm not, I don't tend towards the fanciful in my beliefs. I'm interested in things. I'm curious. The world is an interesting place. But this happened. I mean, and there's no other explanation for it.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's a cool story. I had a run in with my grandfather my grandfather died. This is my dad's dad. When I was how old was I? I think I was between 10 and 12 when he died, and I think I was probably 12. Anyway, when I was about 20, I think I was living in London. I think I must have been like 25, and I was home for the holidays. I was like home at my mom's house in between, like for Christmas time, and I was in this bed, and in the middle of the night, it was really like a Christmas Carol or something. I wake up and the light is on. My lamp was next to my bed, and like I think that's what woke me up. And then I sat up, and there was a man at the bottom of my bed, and I was like, whoa! I freaked out real quick, and then he had a glow around him. He wasn't like, he was a little bit see through, kind of like with like a ghost, right? Like he wasn't. He was more solid than see through. I would say that he wasn't like 100% like completely transparent, but there was definitely something not completely. There was a glow on the person, right? And he was younger than I'd ever known him. Like he died when he was 70 or something, and this person was like 30, but I could still recognize him. And I went, Grandpa Joe, and he just like walked from the foot of the bed over to me, and he was like, I'm sorry I have to do this to you. You were the only one I could get through to. And I was like, what? And then he touched my hand, and we were transported back to the house that like he died in, and that my dad grew up in, and we used to live there when before my parents were divorced and stuff. So it was like a big family home, and it was like this big adobe on the Rio Grande River. I lived in Albuquerque. And anyway, there was a bunch of built-in furniture in this house. And so there was a dining room that had like a built-in hutch, or I don't know, drawers or something in it. And so he was like, okay, so come here. And I was like, okay, like, where are we? And then like, so he's like, okay, like, come here. And I was like, okay, what? And then he bends down, he opens like the second drawer to the bottom, and he's like, look up under here. And I was like, what? I was like, this is very weird. So like I bent down, I was like on my knees, I looked up the drawer, and there was a piece of paper taped to the bottom of the drawer. And then he said, when you wake up, you need to find your way back to New Mexico. You need to go to this house. You need to tell them that you used to live here and that you forgot something. They'll let you get it. And you come in, you need to take this piece of paper, you need to give it to your dad. And I was like, okay.
Mission.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, okay. And then he was like, I'm sorry. Like I tried you're the only one that I could get through to. And I was like, okay. And I said, so what's it like being dead? And like, and he kind of laughed, and he said, it's nothing like what you think. And I said, I was like, is God real? Like, hey, what's it like being dead? Like, what is it like? Is there actually heaven? Is there, like, I started asking him stuff like that, and like it was real fast. I was like spitfiring like everything I could think to ask, and he was just like, and he just laughed, and he said, it's nothing like what you think. And then he touched my hand again, and then I was alone in my bed. No one was there. And it was a very weird experience. So I thought I just had a trippy dream or something for like about a week. I felt, but it kept on gnawing at me, and I thought like, man, that was that was a very lucid dream, and like I was like that sucked, and I didn't really want to tell anybody about it because I was still at that point was like self-conscious about
Mhm.
being considered crazy or something. So then I told my mom. I was like, hey, so yeah, this happened, and she's like, well, why don't you tell your grandmother, his wife, who was still alive at the time. And
Mhm.
so I told my grandmother. I said, hey, so like this is what happened. And so she's like, okay, the second drawer to the left or the right? Like, because there was two things, and I was like, it's to the right. So she goes and she does what I was supposed to do. Like, she goes to the house, she tells them, whatever. So she goes and she gets the thing. So she calls me a couple days later, and she's like, okay, so I did it. There was a piece of paper taped underneath that second drawer from the bottom. She's like, it's a score sheet, like with like our family used to play this game of cards all the time, or we still do sometimes when we get together, called Rook.
Mhm.
And it was a score sheet. She's like, and it had a perfect score on it, which like that's 200 if anybody plays Rook. But and those are very rare to come by. And I was just kind of like, oh, okay. And she was like, I'll give it to your dad and see what happens. And my dad's like not into this kind of stuff. But anyway, so he she did give it to him, and then a couple weeks later I get a call from my dad. He's like, I don't know how you did that, pumpkin, but just thank you. And I was like, well, what was it, what? And he was like, just well, it just meant a lot to me. It was like a game I played with my dad, blah blah, like some dumb stuff. Like I don't really know. I don't think that they were on good terms so much like when he died. And I don't know
Mhm.
if it was like like a olive branch, or I'm not really 100% sure. Like even to this day my dad's just like, no, I don't want to talk about that, blah, blah, blah. And it was just like, oh, whatever. It was just, it was just nice. I was like, okay. And I was like, well, that was lame. I thought it would have been like something cooler than that. But at least for me, it was like a weird. Um, and then like I've told people that story, and they've been like, well, you must have been playing around with your when you were a kid and saw something taped underneath there. So like you in your subconscious, you must have known. Like I get weird comments like that and stuff. So whatever. I don't know, but that was my ghost experience.
I think that's pretty cool, and it's obviously something that meant a lot to your dad. Like I could see that if him and his father didn't part on good terms, but they bowled a perfect game together, or caught a giant marlin, and there was a photo of it, or the score
Right.
sheet. That's a whole flood of good memories, and it's sort of letting no hard feelings.
Yeah, I think that's essentially the gist of what it was. So that was my ghost encounter.
But it wasn't like birth certificates for your two twin sisters on on different
No, yeah,
continents.
no, exactly. Or it wasn't like a deed to some amazing, uh, you know, piece of property that we didn't know about, or
Right,
yeah,
right,
nothing,
right.
nothing crazy like that.
A
So
key to your Swiss bank vault or something.
right, right. Yeah. So anyway, I don't know. Like, so what do you think about like my new? Like, it's not even that new, but like, what do you? Who do you think controls the world? Like, what do you think's really going on here?
Who do I think controls the world? Who do I think controls
Yeah,
the
who's the
world?
hidden hand here? What do you think that's all about? Is there anything controlling the world?
Uh, I am positive that there are entities or people that have oversized influence on things. I mean, that's just the way of the world. I mean, it's always been, and it always shall be. Whether it's more or less than before, I'm not sure. I mean, because and I think it probably varies depending on where you are in the world. Um, but I do believe what Jeff Goldblum talked about, or what was written for him in Jurassic Park. I think that there's more chaos than order, and I think I'm sure there are some that take advantage of the incompetence and laziness and just trying to get by as for most, because most of us are just trying to get through, a day or a week or whatever the case might be. You and I are probably fortunate we have the ability to do these shows, and we do it out of love, and it's fun, and it's social, and it's interesting, and it's educational. Um, but I don't think that there's like 10 families out there that have been ruling everything for millennia. But then again, if they were, I wouldn't know, would I?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, like, yeah, you look at the whole like where they go down those rabbit holes of it's the Rothschilds and the whatever, um, and I'm kind of like, yeah, maybe, but even if that's and I like what you said about the chaos thing, because I was saying this the other day, because like a lot of people are getting into the whole like, oh, like all the food shortages are coming, and this is like, into the spiral of like how horrible things are about to be for forever and a day, and like the world's over, and you're
Mhm.
just kind of going like, that's the thing about releasing chaos and chaos theory, is that it doesn't always work in your favor, even if you are a hidden hand influencer controller of messing with the world. It doesn't necessarily isn't going to always go your way. So like I think we just really have no idea what's coming down the pike. Nobody.
Yeah,
And
I've been the member of a board of trustees and the board of governors, and I've lived in too many places with condo and homeowners associations to think that any group of people can agree on enough things to have coordinated efforts for any lengthy period of time.
yeah, that's funny. That's a good point. Um, yeah, so okay, like what do you think about I don't know. What do you think about the whole like we're both into giants. Okay, and that's another thing I wanted to talk about. Okay, so you also read the Book of Og, right? There you go. And so okay, so like we have to clear this up. Like basically it is written by a science fiction writer.
Yeah, I was very upset to learn that.
Yeah. Yeah, like what's his name? What is the name again?
Demon,
Yeah, but what's his first name?
I think it's Peter.
Peter Dimon. Okay, so yeah, and like I reached out to like the Father Martin guy in there who's supposed, and I also reached out to uh Dimon, and there was no reply back at all from either one of them and stuff, and I was kind of going like, yeah, it's but they did it. He did a really good job, but just when you think like, oh, if something is what do you call it, like if something is authentic or something really is real, like and you're like, oh, there's no way somebody could make that up, it's like actually there's a lot of really amazing things that are made up too. So
Yeah, but I know you. I mean, obviously, anyone who hasn't read it, he does a really, really good job of using the language and the cadence and the
and
paragraph.
cutting it off like at the right point that's like not finished when you're like, wait, oh wait, what, and you have to make a lot of inferences, and yeah, just
Well,
how
there,
like a fragmented script or fragmented thing would be.
yes, and the kind of repetitiveness that an author wouldn't do, naturally. So he spends a lot of time covering like 50 different giant armies and their names, and then he covers all of them as to what they're doing in battle, like one paragraph at a time, and it doesn't read well. I mean, it's like the begetting and the begatting provisions of Genesis, not
Right.
provisions. It
Right, where
just
they go down Methu, like Noah to Methu. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's just not good reading. And somebody, I mean, that's a lot of discipline and a lot of work. But there were some chronological errors that, if this was legitimate, would put the canonical world on its head. But also, there were some parts of it that then when I'm reading, I'm like, wait, the order is wrong. I mean, this was post Noah, but also post, well, no, it was pre Noah, but post Tower of Babel. Well, that's not right.
Yeah, or like who's the other one in there that he kills? Like Og kills what's the other giant that who's surfaces?
Nimrod.
Nimrod. Yeah, our Nimrod. And Nimrod is also, I mean, like that's the thing, he uses real historical characters too. So, yeah, it's interesting. But
So Moses is the one who kills him at the end, or the book cuts off as they're having a confrontation. So that's the cliffhanger. But I mean,
well,
in
no, or Moses kills Og in the actual Bible. But it doesn't actually kill him in the book of Og yet.
right, we never read it, but the inference is that's the last one he's taught. Like Moses is giving him a speech about how he's going to do this, that, and then it just ends. Um, but Moses in the Bible never got to set foot in the Holy Land, which is where
Og.
Canaan or Canaan was, where Og was. So that's also sort of a biggie. So those were things. I mean, listen, it was disappointing, but I'm still glad that I read it. I wasn't sure what Rephaim were. Um, they really spent a lot of time. I mean, I like the dark ones. I like the light
Yeah,
ones.
me too. And the influence, and yeah, and I liked the way the 100,000 giant ore went down, and like the um yeah, it was good. It's a good read, but it's probably just
Sure.
100% fiction.
Yeah. So some of them had like devices that made them like sort of like Ultrons or whatever, not Ultron, like sort of like Transformers. Like the giant with no
Right.
arm got in his thing, and all of a sudden he had like a battle arm there, and they had flying devices. Which was very interesting because the timing was great because I had just interviewed an author, Ken Godsworth or Godswood. I'm sorry, forgive me for getting it wrong on one end, but he wrote an interesting book called UFOs in the Bible. And in what he did is he went back and he retranslated Old Hebrew, and he found that cherubim and seraphim were mistranslated as angels, but they're really edges, and that they were basically like Merkaba, like or triangles, like almost like the
Shapes.
Vinayas were.
Okay.
So when I read that, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm picturing in my head, that they were battle vehicles, uh, you know, um, but then learning that it was probably fiction, it's a relief and disappointing at the same time.
Well, I guess that's true because if it really were real, that would change a lot of things. So yeah. Um, but then because it claims that it's like new evidence, our new archives from the Vatican that have been released. Like that's what it claims, like in 2016 or whatever. But they don't really. I don't know. It does make me like. I don't know. I question a lot of the texts that we have, or get. I'm always questioning everything. So it doesn't mean I don't believe it or do. Like I'm just saying I question it all.
Well, you
So
should. Have you ever spoken to Reverend Jim Willis?
mm-mm.
Okay, he's terrific. He's written a lot of books, and he's been an ordained minister reverend for 40 some odd years. And he wrote a book called Censoring God, and it's very easy to read. It's eminently readable. And I love both halves. I especially love the first half, which was very Von Daniken, Sitchin-esque, and but it just flowed more easily. The second was more into the Bible, but basically it points out how every part of the Bible that God was censored, that the Abrahamic Bible that was censored, that the books of Moses were censored. There were tons of people writing it. There were witnesses. It was written, 1,000 years after the events, were said to have occurred. And everyone knows about the Council of Nicaea, and 4 Gospels were accepted, and 32 others weren't, and the Ethiopian Bible has more books, and the Eastern Orthodox Bibles have 76 instead of 73. And so, there's no shortage of reasons to question which text is correct, because we've, and then the Dead Sea Scrolls got
Yeah,
discovered.
Gnostic stuff. Yeah. Um, and then they still, but yeah, okay. It just makes me. I'm always questioning all that stuff too. And then like I started recently reading the Bhagavad Gita, and I don't know. It's hard to. It's hard to put all your stock, or that much stock for me, in okay, so first of all, you have multiple translations. You have like, they're you're going from whatever, whether it's clay tablets to pig sheep guts to whatever kind of parchment to my English speaking eyes. It's like there's a lot of stuff that can be lost in translation, no matter what culture it comes from. And then, I also kind of feel that, yeah, I mean, like even if you try to read like Chaucer English, like that's like what if go to try to read the Canterbury Tales, like that's how language changes from then to now. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. And probably there were versions of the Bible written in Chaucer's Middle English or Old English. But yeah, I mean, it was Old Hebrew to New Hebrew to Seleucid or Koine Greek, and then into Latin, and somewhere in there there's Aramaic books, and somewhere in there there's Arabic, but sometimes there's also Egyptian, and then and then there's some other languages in some of the other texts, and Ethiopian languages weren't the same as the ones just across the water over there in the desert. So yeah, and then you
Well,
get
and
to English.
in any kind of translation today, the the same book translated by two different people can be completely different read. So,
Mhm.
and then and all of those things are different translations as it gets on down. So then there's that, but what you said earlier about like the cherubs and stuff being more like Merkabas or like light being kind of things, that is actually an interesting thing because I do think there are examples, particularly with like I went to Marfa Lights in Marfa, Texas, and they're yeah, I saw them one time, and I even have a video on it, and like you could see like the stuff I saw or whatever. There are. What do you think about light itself having intelligence?
I don't see why not. I mean, there have been recent scientific discoveries, and you can question science as well, but where they can track dreams and they can track consciousness, and they've been able to communicate with people in dream phases, having them do mathematical questions. And the point of that is that it's because they're tracking energy. So if thoughts are energy, well, I mean, energy, is easily detected through our senses: sight, sound, smell. Why not light have intelligence? If intelligence can be transferred through energy, it's some form of matter. So why not in a particle, in a light form?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's cool, and I definitely I'm on that thought wave as well, kind of
I
thing.
mean, lasers read, communication. I mean, that's what CD players were, when they were new and cool.
I always think about like if we found a CD 100 years from now, they would be like, oh, I don't know what this is, and
Mhm.
this was a fertility device, or this is like, I mean, like who knows what they're gonna be saying? Like, if our let's say if you found a CD buried, um, like 2,000 years from now, they would have no idea how to play that thing or do what to do with it. You would think,
Right.
maybe, but
Or if they found it 200 years ago, they'd probably think it was a children's toy, or it might be the most precious
jewelry or
thing.
yeah.
Right. Might be worth, whatever their equivalent of $1 million is.
Right. This is a really, really high end coin. It does look, I mean, it is a circular thing with the hole in the middle. It's definitely could be a coin.
But but as it turns out, it's just my second copy of Boston's second album.
Right. It's just a shame they can't listen to it from then. But yeah, I mean, we're almost at that point with 8 tracks and stuff like that where I don't know if very many people, I've never even seen an 8 track, but I definitely know if you're under 20, you don't even know what that is.
I know what 8 tracks are. So I still remember some 8 tracks. I don't think I have any though.
Yeah, I still have some CDs I need to get rid of.
Oh my, I've got a whole box full of CDs.
Yeah, it was so weird. Like we spent a lot of money on those, like $15 for one song. You may not like the whole album. Like you would basically buy a CD just with the yeah, just basically not knowing what everything was on it.
You would hope that you liked some of the other
Yeah,
songs,
you'd hope there were other good songs besides the one song you knew about from the radio. Like
and
that's
then
the
you pretend you love the entire album.
yeah. It's also kind of weird too when I think about uh people a lot of the younger generations will never know what it is to have to wait for a show.
Mhm.
It's just like, oh, it's just released on Netflix. You can watch it at your own leisure at your own time. No, it used to be like it was on at this time on this day and you had to watch it there or forever hold your peace.
But you used to have to wait for a song, and you had to have one of those recorders, and you'd like wait and hope that the DJ wasn't talking over it, and that you could hit record just
Yeah.
at the right time to get the song that you wanted. All
And then
those
it would
mixtapes.
the mixtapes and then you would remix after remix of other people. So the quality was super by the time you got what you wanted, it was super crazy. Yeah, good times, man. Makes you
Yep.
appreciate what you have now. Like I don't know.
Absolutely. And it's fun to think about the things that, kids now won't know. You say, hey, you sound like a broken record. Great, thanks. I broke what record? Speed? What did I break?
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's not it. Oh, sorry. And there's going to be other stuff too. I mean, we probably can't even imagine what some of it is.
Like, what do you think about consciousness?
I'm for it. No, I mean, I think consistent with what I just said. I mean, I think that it is part of energy, and they've actually been able to track energy leaving a dying body, um, which seems to be consistent with the other intelligent energy. What is that if not consciousness, and what is that if not a soul?
Yeah, yeah.
So
I
I think that science and some other, what you want to call a religion, fine, spirituality, there, it's actually starting to prove some of the overlapping Venn diagram portions of spirituality and religion. I don't think it's fighting it. It used to be science versus religion. I mean, I think you can still do that if you want to, but if you actually look at it and you step back, I think science is actually proving spirituality, whether it's, the King
right.
James Bible or the Torah or the Quran or whatever, that's up to the individual. But as far as general spirituality and that we really are stardust and everything is connected, I mean, I think that that's empirically true at this point.
Does seem that it does if you uh yeah, I think if you really look into energy itself, then yeah, if you look at it like that, it's definitely looking that way for sure, which I like. But I mean, of course, people will argue with that, which is their prerogative to do so, I suppose.
That's fine if there's no controversy, nobody's listening, right?
True. Okay, so what's your take on actual giants then?
Ooh, I go back and forth. I mean, so I I don't think that there were actual giants the way it's thought of, sort of 13 feet tall or 30 feet tall or whatever. I think there's probably like lemurs from bones that were indistinguishable from human bones, but they were belong to a giant sloth or something like that. Um, you know or I forgot the scientific name of the giant ape. um, or but I also, there's whales used to be land walking, and they found some skeletons in the Sahara of all places, but from 43 million years ago, when the Sahara wasn't the Sahara, it was underwater. Or rather was, I'm sorry, it wasn't underwater, it was closer to the water, and the temperature was different. Point is that the whale shoulder bone, it's completely indistinguishable from a human shoulder bone, except for size. Some smaller, some larger, most larger. So I think that maybe some of them would have been, bones from whales, and if they were on land, they would have had maybe their hip structure might have been the same as well. So I think that there may be some of that um, in there too. But I don't discount the possibility that they were, from Australopithecus or larger hominids, rather. I mean, in the last 10 years, denisovans were discovered,
Yeah,
Homo naledi, which are smaller, um, but they're constantly finding new things. I mean, so much has been discovered and learned about Neanderthals. They weren't just, sort of ape-like dullards. They had art, they had religion, they had culture. It's not even clear who taught who, whether it was Homo sapiens or
buried their
Homo.
dead. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we discovered a lot, but it's a big world, and we've built on a lot of it. And there's a lot of things that might be lost to time. So I think that it's entirely possible, but I don't think that there were giants 5,000 years ago battling the Israelites.
Hmm.
Now, maybe if some people came down from Sweden and Norway, and they were like 6'2" or something like that, and the average Israelite was 5'1" back then, they might look like giants. I mean, and if the Israelites did in fact win, then the victors write the history, right? So you might make it so that your enemies were much bigger than you, as opposed to just bigger than you. I mean, if I'm fighting an NBA player, chances are they're going to win. They're not a giant, but they're a foot taller than I'm 5'10". So if they're 6'6" or 6'10", they're a giant to me. If you're in combat with them, they're a giant.
Well, there's that true. I mean, but there are you know there are even modern day humans that can be as tall as like 8 9 feet. So I mean,
Sure, Shaq. I
not
mean, not 8 9 feet, but
well. So I think it was the tallest person like 9 feet something.
ever I'm not sure, but yeah, but usually those folks are not. Usually they need canes and they need assistance,
Yeah, yeah,
walking and moving. But I mean, again, going back to the NBA or European, or NFL football, where it's not that unusual to have 6'8", 6'9" offensive tackles, and 7 foot something centers in basketball, very athletic, coordinated, people. Um, well, they didn't just pop out of nowhere either. They have ancestors as well. So I mean, so again, most humans are, short, like, typically we're taller than our parents. And people were generally smaller then. So if you did have folks that were 6'2" or 7'4", whatever range you want to pick, they would appear as giants to those folks. And if the smaller folks actually did prevail, you definitely make your glory greater. I mean, just like sort of like a Roman era, when they used to say the Persian army had like 300,000 soldiers, and people were like, maybe it was more like 60,000.
So what's your take on Atlantis?
I think that Atlantis is an archetype. I don't know that there necessarily was or was not a place called Atlantis. I mean, I don't see necessarily why not. And just from the descriptions, the Atlantis as described was not so far and away technologically superior than other places. In fact, they lost ultimately to Athens. So, it might be similar to the American colonies being able to beat the British, so they were, a few generations ahead in technology. And so, or any sort of first contact encounter. But I think it might be an archetype for, some of the cultures that were a little bit older, whether that's Atlantis solely or, Hyboria or, you know, Lemuria with Mu. I mean, I don't think that there was one place that was ahead of everywhere else. I think if there was one place, there were probably many, just like you have New York, LA,
Yeah,
Moscow,
yeah, exactly.
Paris
Like
now.
like an epoch, or yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so Hyperborea. Okay, so what do you know about the inner Earth, and what do you think about inner Earth?
Um, I know it's really interesting. I've had a few guests on the show who really are students of that and really truly believe in it for different reasons. Um, I'm fascinated by it. One of my favorite books is called The Descent. It's fiction. It's by a guy named Jeff Long. And his has an inner Earth, but not in the way that sort of like, Kong versus Godzilla, where they went through and there was the gravity inversion and that it was actually,
Did you say descent?
yeah, not like that. It's more like the tribes of humans long ago went underneath and flourished there with a civilization in the caves, and there was underwater cisterns and rivers, and it's very interesting. I think that that's probably more real, but then again, there was just a sinkhole in China, and there's all sorts of species of trees and stuff that they have never detected before. Probably there'll be some animal life, whether it's insects or birds or mammals. I don't know. Nothing's been detected yet, but I wouldn't be surprised. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were pockets or that there was something underneath the ice. Hopefully we'll never see it due to melting, but pockets under the ice in Antarctica where there's whole different things that we can barely imagine. But Jules Verne had the Hall of Crystals in Journey to the Center of the Earth. Well, they found halls of crystals, in
Yeah,
Mexico and other places.
yeah,
So
crystal caves.
I don't discount the possibility of anything.
Well, I mean, I also, I did the math the other day, and I can't remember what it was, but it was something about, um, the Earth is like 24,800 and something, or maybe it's almost 25,000 miles, like the circumference.
The circumference, yeah.
And the Mariana Trench, which is the deepest place in the world, even deeper than anything we've ever dug or whatever, is about 7 miles deep from ocean level. And then so when you do that as a percentage, it ends up being like 0.00029 or so. You can double check my math or whatever, but um
I
basically,
assure you I cannot.
well, people listening can double check my math, whatever that is. Just divide 7 divided by 25,000 and whatever that ends up being. And then you think about it like going like, okay, so we have gone into the center of the earth less than like zero, not 0.000 something percent. Like we don't like thinking of it as a iron core magnetic molting ball of lava with just floating plate tectonics on it is ultimately a theory. I mean, it may have a lot of substantial evidence, like with volcanoes and things that support that, but these could be from different things, and we don't really 100% understand what we're actually even on.
Well,
Right.
there's also a whole lot of layers between here and there.
There are, but we don't. That's the thing. We haven't physically. There, there's a level, there's a limit to what we can actually study with this stuff.
At this point, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, at this point. So I'm
And
just
I'm
like,
not even sure how they measure the depth of the Marianas Trench. I mean, how do they know they got to the deepest point? Do we
oh yeah,
have sonar that can go that far? I'm not sure that we do.
yeah. I mean, well, and that just keeps on getting better and better, like the or penetrating radars and whatever. So yeah. Anyway, that the inner Earth is one of my fascinations. Like I love hearing people's thing about that because I definitely think there's a lot of room for, um, yeah, stuff.
Well, I spoke to another minister, another Reverend Jim, this is Williamson, who in his interpretation of scripture, which he'll tell you is not an interpretation, it's the way it is that there's proof of it, and that the giants were in there, and that the giants were in the pocket of the earth or the bosom of the earth. And the bosom then didn't mean like to a mother's bosom or man's chest or whatever. There was actually a pocket. It was almost like a satchel. So it was a pocket. So it was actually a pocket
Fingers out.
inside the earth. And there's a lot of stuff tying giants that they went into the earth in the flood. I mean, the flood myth says all the Nephilim were done away with, but yet we have Og of Bashan, who, whether this book is true or not, Og appears in the Bible. And as did Goliath and his brothers, among others. So obviously, not all of the giants were killed, or at least not all of their descendants were. I mean, somebody besides Noah, and the animals survived. Not to mention, there's flood myths all over the place where somebody survived, and I'm willing to believe that several of them are Noah, but they're not all Noah. The ones in Central America and South America and Africa are Noah. Maybe the Sumerian one is also Noah, and maybe what's his name? Who's Prometheus's kid? Deucalion?
Yeah, I don't know. Let me look up.
I don't know. Anyway, he's also in the myth. Also, it's interesting. The one of the Greeks wrote the 5 ages of man, and one is the age of heroes, and they use the giants of old, the great men of renown. That's almost word for word in Genesis. And these were written at different times, and lots of cultures have the 5 ages of man. I mean, the Mayans had the 5 ages of man. I believe other First Nations had the 5 ages of man as well. So, there's too many things across too many cultures for it to all be one myth. It's not like there was one tribe, that went all over the place, and the myth sort of got stretched. The world's too big for that, and the skeletal remain and human history is too scattered for it to be something just that simple. That at some point 200,000 years ago, some group of Homo sapiens came up with the idea and said, "Okay, well, all of you peace out and go to the 4 corners of the earth."
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so what's your plans for your podcast going forward?
Well, I'm sort of a obsessive booker, so I book too much. So my plans are to continue what I'm doing. I'm largely booked until the fall. So I've got some archaeologists and anthropologists booked. I've got Reverend Jim Willis coming on again. I am affiliated with something called the Nephilim Anthropology Conference. So some of the speakers from that group will be on. Heather Arnold, who is a archaeologist, anthropologist. Andrew Goff's supposed to be on again. He's been on. He spoke on the Inner Earth, but he's also spoke on he did something on the historic relationship with bees, and it was like one of my favorite shows. He also did like the real Da Vinci Code. I gave him the assignment to look up peacocks and Tartarian and figure out. I've got a rabbi coming out to talk about gematria and the Zohar. So he's going to come to it from Israel. Interesting, he's from Mexico City, but he's been in Israel the last 21 years. I don't know, whole bunch of stuff like that. I've got a Mambo Brandy from New Orleans who's going to talk about New Orleans voodoo hoodoo. I'm talking to Sally Glassman, who is the only Caucasian ordained high priestess in voodoo. And I have a yes, but it's not a yes in pen. I'm going in different directions, and every time I go to a direction, it leads me somewhere else because I didn't know that something called hoodoo existed. So once I found out about hoodoo and learned that I knew Santeria and voodoo were different things, but never heard of hoodoo. So now I go there, and then I'm going to learn something else. And I used to think the Black Israelites were the Beta Israelis, and it's not. It's completely different. So now I have to go in search of finding Beta Israeli. And I also thought that maybe it was conflated with Rastafarianism, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. So now I've got to search out that. So I've got plenty of things that I'm looking to cast my web into, and hopefully get more yeses than those.
Very cool. Yeah, I mean, it is like one rabbit hole leads to the next rabbit hole that leads to the next rabbit hole. How much have you dug into the, megalithic culture?
It's funny, yes. Gary Wayne is one of the people from the Nephilim Anthropology Conference, and he's booked on the show as well. And he's going to talk specifically about megalithic culture. How much have I dug into it? I mean, you sort of bump into it in everything else. So I would say a fair amount, but that's not really my particular interest. For whatever reason, I just feel like if it exists in so many places that obviously people figured out how to do it. It wasn't easy, but they figured out how to do it. But again, I'm very happy to be proven wrong and to listen to everything and whatever it is. My show, I don't really try to challenge my guests. I'm not interested in doing that. They're guests. I'm there for, I'm going to ask questions, but not in a challenging way. And I'm going to engage with them. But it's up to the audience to decide whether they're convinced or not, or they want to do further research. But, I don't want my guests coming out, God, that guy hit me with gotcha questions. What a jerk. No, I want them to go, let me say my piece. He asked some intelligent questions, or some of the questions were done, but I answered them. And that's it. I would go back again. That's what I'm looking to do. I'm not 60 Minutes. I'm not looking to expose anyone. If we can find some terrific truths, that's fine. But I want to inform, educate, and entertain, and the order isn't particularly important.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I like that too. I like that approach. I'm very similar to. In
Yeah,
that.
I know you do. I listen to a bunch of your shows. One of my guests introduced us.
Yeah, Paul Abbott actually introduced me. The Distant Origins. Paul Abbott. He's got a YouTube channel.
All right, he wasn't my guest, but Rick Voot was. VOOGHT. They know each other, so he introduced. Yeah, he just wrote a book as well. He's interesting. He's really interesting. That was, I think, that might have been episode 100.
Okay, cool. I'll go check that one out because I didn't listen to that one, but I feel like I've seen that name before, but he's never contacted me directly, so I don't know who he is. I'll take this part out because I don't want him to be offended. But.
So there's a lot of people out there. I don't think they get offended. I think I think that I mean, unless it's Graham Hancock, but he has a right to be offended. If you're dabbling in this world and you haven't heard of Graham Hancock by like your fourth week looking into it, you're doing something wrong. But I think generally they want their work to get out. They want their story to get out. They want to, tell people, and promote their show, their book, whatever it is.
Very cool. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Me too. And I'm always looking for and open to other, new ideas or new ways of thinking about something that I hadn't thought about. So I definitely am on a similar trajectory to you in terms of guest and subject matter really too, which is really awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I also do things that maybe are more frivolous. Like I've had a couple show on vampires, and but I love that I showed on gargoyles, just dragons, and sometimes they're with not renowned experts, but people that I know in the world that are smart and interesting. I have one of the smartest guys I know. He did a show on H.P. Lovecraft because I don't know much about H.P. Lovecraft. I don't know how I missed this in my youth, but I'm not going to read thousands of pages of turn of the century English now. Um, but I want to know what it's all about, and I can watch some YouTube stuff, and that's cool. Or I can listen to a really, really smart guy I know that doesn't just read books once, but reads them like 10 times and can do a great job of informing the audience and myself.
Yeah, and it really is impossible to um it's impossible to deep dive on every single thing. You have to you really have to curate for your own self like what stuff really interests you because it everything can be super fine tooth combed. Like, there's so
Absolutely.
many people. Like I have so many books right now that I haven't read because I mean there's just so much to get to. And I'm finding that well, honestly I'm finding that I'm a little bit like the more technology keeps on going on and then the more we have these phones and all this stuff like it gets to where my attention span for reading gets like less and less the older I'm getting. I don't know if it's an age thing or if it's like a other distraction thing or whatever, but so I have to really I don't know. I'm glad actually this podcast has like been the best thing for me with reading. It's like forced me to read a lot of stuff way
Me
more
too.
than I normally would have.
Me too. I read books now for this podcast.
Yeah, it's almost like you got to do homework for your shows.
Yeah, I mean, guests send me books, and they're not on Audible, so I mean, I have to read them
Yeah, me too.
cover to cover. They'll catch me. They'll know if I didn't.
They will, and yeah, and that happens to me all the time. They're better interviews when you've read their book. They really are. Like
Yes.
when you know what it is you're asking, it's way better.
Yeah, I mean, talking about King Og, I mean, we wouldn't know, the sort of the order was wrong about the flood and the Tower of Babel if we hadn't read the book. If you just listen to YouTube clips, which I listened to a few, and some of them are great, some of them are scary, some of them are treating this like it's absolutely canon, others are not. Some are dismissive. Some are playing both sides of it. I think so, like we are. We're like, we know it's fiction, but it's still let's talk about it seriously. Um, but but if we didn't read it, we wouldn't be able to discuss some of those things that are inconsistent with what you know. If we take the Bible to at least be chronologically correct, at least in the context of what's supposed to be a biblical ancillary book, adjacent book, then there's inconsistencies there with time that we wouldn't have known about had we not read it.
Hmm. Well, and I mean, and I can always be convinced otherwise if there is any kind of physical evidence you can show me that it's real or any manuscript that you can show me that you got the translation from or something like that I can always be like oh okay well then I can readjust my uh opinion with that.
Hey, you never know. They could be digging somewhere in Moab right now on the Golan Heights or on the Jordan, the Moab Plateau in Jordan, and find all these tablets which recount this story.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so is there anything that I didn't ask you that you wanted to touch on?
Hmm. What are you doing with your show?
With my show I am well I do feel like I'm kind of dude heavy. I need to like start getting some more chicks on there. I gotta look into that more. Mine seems to be going way more into the ancient history stuff than because I wanted it to be about just everything like consciousness and aliens and just way broader. So I do plan on making it even more broader the more time goes on. And I have a full time job, so it's not like something where in an ideal world, I would love to just do this. Like, this is what I would do, and I would have like 3 or 4 guests on a week, and like that's what I do. But as it is, I'm just sticking to trying to make one every week or two, and like just keep on. I mean, for me, it's an excuse for me to get to talk to really intelligent people that, like you said, like know nuances of a subject that I'm interested in.
Mhm.
So that is like, if that's worth its weight in gold for me. So I'm gonna keep on keeping on and have fun with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, until Gaio Spotify, contacts me and offers me a great contract. Yeah, I've got to keep that day job, which by the way, I love my day job. So
Yeah.
it's largely great. Um, no, I don't think there's anything that you didn't ask me. Um, you know, I think that both of us are a little disappointed to learn that King Og is almost certainly fiction. I would have loved to have like looked at it more historically. I mean, one of the interesting things is that they pull giants from other places on the planet, the different races, different colors, different cultures. Some of which they told you where they were from. Some of them they said from the lands beyond, or the lands that had no name. Some from just said from the east. But 3 were from Africa, but obviously different places in Africa. Um, and usually when you hear about giants, you only hear about either white giants or sort of like with red hair and whatever. And so that would have been interesting if it was part of the historical or even semi-historical record. But alas, it's not yet.
Yet, yeah. I just had Jim Vieira and Hugh Newman on, and their books on giant. I mean, there are accounts of bigger. I mean, I think there's enough evidence to suggest and support that there are or were, whether to what size and how much. I do believe in giants, probably more of an extent than you do, actually. But you know, uh, I don't know how, their population, like how many they would have been, or
Mhm.
like how pervasive it would have been or not. I mean, and I think about that a lot. But I also, I mean, I'm really been thinking a lot about how the Earth has. We may not have had the same physics that we're working with. Like, like I don't, like you said, like a well could walk back then, and now a well would collapse on its own gravity. Like, I mean, maybe like even if it's bone, I don't know. We have the way in which flora and fauna used to be super huge and isn't now makes me think like either maybe we could have had a gouge of gravity. We could have had way more oxygen or in the air. I don't really know, but I definitely think conditions haven't always been as conditions are. And so that's always something to keep in mind and something to always like examine further, and like we may get better with. So I don't know. I'm just keeping digging because it's fun.
Well, predators often adapt to the size of their prey, and if there were megafauna, then why not megafauna humans that were hunting them? If
Yeah.
the buffalo and the sloths and everything else were bigger,
Yeah,
why
20
why
foot
not?
sloths 10,000 years ago. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, why not people too? So yeah, I'd be happy to. I'm not married to my beliefs. It's just what I believe. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm not an anthropologist, and they don't agree internally as well. I mean, that's the one thing I've learned is that
Yeah,
you
that's
can't
true.
really get agreement. And the more you learn, you realize. I mean, it's amazing how much we do know, but it's maybe even more amazing how much we don't know.
Well, and it's amazing how much like whatever becomes the canon or the mainstream like accepted view on any one subject, even if you go look at like academics amongst themselves argue or have completely differing views from each other on so many different like any date in history that you're talking about. So, yeah, the more you know, the more you know you don't know. That's
And,
definitely.
and not everything's a metaphor, and not everything's a parable. Some
Yeah.
things might have just been what they are, and then so that's what people say. Everything's a metaphor. Everything's a parable. It's an allegory. No, no. I mean, some things are sure, but not everything.
See, but then that's another bag of whistles on how do you know what's what, I don't know. Like you gotta figure it out. But yeah, okay, so uh and you put out one a week or what's your schedule?
Pretty diligent about one a week, sometimes more. I have a cousin show called Garden Views. It's on the same feed, but it's
Garden
more
of what?
Garden Views. It's on the same feed. If you subscribe to Garden of Doom, you'll get them both. That is more legal and current events, though. In the beginning, they were sort of more, it was less consistent. And the topics were, it was just shows that I didn't really feel fit on Garden of Doom, because I have a bunch of shows on Garden of Doom that probably don't really fit into it, but I still like them. So I just added a different name for more of those. Let's just call them more like 60 minutes types of interviews. So, for example, retired chief of NYPD detectives, Joseph Borelli, I interviewed him. And for those who don't know who he is, which is probably most people, he led the task force that arrested the son of Sam. Also, the first World Trade Center bombing and other high-profile cases. So we talked about his career as in the police. He turned 90. His birthday party was the day that we interviewed. But I also talked to someone who teaches a master's level course in cryptocurrency, because I don't really understand cryptocurrency. I wanted to understand more. I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with the laws of space. So that became a project too. So I had someone from Berkeley Law who does the Institute of the Law of the Sea, and she came on. I've had Admiralty and Maritime attorneys. I've had immigration attorneys talk about diplomatic status and international organizations. I had an air traffic controller on who was a civilian and military air traffic controller, talk about sort of airspace and how that works. I have a retired 2-star U.S. Air Force general coming out to talk about airport management. Because all these things,
yeah, that stuff is cool. I mean, like, and man, I'm a flight attendant, but like, yeah, I always think about like when not Neuralink, that's another interesting one though. But when Starlink came, I was like, well, who legally gives you the right to be able to potentially change the night sky?
Like, and more interestingly, who legally has the authority to stop you, and then how do they stop you? I mean,
true.
if you are SpaceX and you have, I don't think they call themselves Blackwater anymore, but you hired Blackwater and you put 50 space marines on your ships that go to Mars, and you say it's no longer Mars, it's now planet Noli, which is Elon backwards. Who says you can't? Is Mars subject to the laws of Earth? And the guy with 50 marines wins until there's somebody else with probably 500 marines that can overcome fortified locales. So I like everyone else don't want to repeat exploitation and possible colonialization and things like that. I'm very concerned that it's just that we already know what's going to happen. It's the British East India Company. So, but I mean, on the other hand, it's exciting. It's going to create lots of jobs. It may, save the earth in so many ways. If you can get your minerals and your precious metals out of dead asteroids and dead rocks in space, rather than digging into Western China, maybe that means that the Chinese don't have to, kill Uyghurs anymore. I mean, if resources are less scarce, maybe there'll be a little bit more peace on earth. I mean, that would be nice as well. So, I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. And also with that whole 10 family thing, I mean, 100 years ago, there was no wealthy Bezos family. There was no wealthy Gates family.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't reject the premise that if there is a ruling class, you can't get your way into it, but I don't know. I mean, some of the most powerful people on earth right now, we're not powerful 40 years ago.
That's true. That we know of, unless they're
sure. Fair enough. I see that point.
All right, Jeff. Well, this has been a lot of fun. We'll have to maybe do it again sometime because
I'd love to.
Okay, so tell us what all are you on? You're on Twitter. You're on Spot. What platforms are you on?
Garden of Doom is wherever you can find podcasts. So Apple, Spotify, Spreaker, Podbeam, you name it, SoundCloud, wherever it is. I'm on 2 networks, hoping to build upon that. But yeah, you can find it anywhere. Like I said, if you subscribe to Garden of Doom, you also get Garden Views, whether you want it or not. If you don't like it, don't listen to it. But I think there's something for everybody on Garden of Doom, including history. I just had a former ordained Mormon minister on former, but he taught us about Mormonism. And so, it's not always alternate. Sometimes it's just stuff I don't know about that, that you would consider very much maybe academic, but it's a, 90-minute course instead of, a whole semester of college or whatever. But yeah, I'm on Twitter at IcarusFellMD. Feel free to follow me. I'm on, my email address is right there on your screen. Feel free to email me. I'm pretty responsive. And Garden of Doom has a Facebook page, so come check it out, like it, comment. I'm happy to interact with people. And I think Nikkiana will tell you that I'm pretty responsive. I pride myself on that.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. It was a ton of fun, and hopefully I can reciprocate at some point.
Cool. All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.